Today we'll be primarily looking at major key signatures. We're going to continue looking at major key signatures. We're going to basically just review some of the things that we've been doing all week. But in addition to that, we're also going to be looking at the process for writing key signatures. We've only talked about identifying them so far, so we'll be writing them as well. So before we get into that, let's go ahead and just do some scale writing practice, because we can never do this enough. So I've given you the first pitch for these 5 scales. Let's do them just one at a time. So given the first pitch, complete these major scales. So remember your pattern of half steps and whole steps. I didn't put that here for you. Hopefully we have that memorized by now, but if you need it, here's a keyboard for your reference for those half steps and whole steps. So we've got a mixture of treble and bass clefs. We've got some ledger lines here. So first you'll have to figure out what the starting pitch is and where it falls on the keyboard, and then proceed from there. So let's go ahead and take a minute and do this first one. This first one right up here, take a minute and write out that major scale. Okay, so that should have been about a minute or so. Let's take a look at this one. So in bass clef, this pitch down here with 2 ledger lines is in fact C. So this is a C sharp major. This is one of the trickier scales because it has lots and lots of accidentals. In fact, it has every accidental. Out of necessity, in order to create this scale, if you start on C sharp, up a whole step is D sharp, up a whole step is E sharp. That's tricky. Half step is F sharp, A sharp, G sharp, A sharp, up a whole step is B sharp, also tricky, and then finally C sharp. So this is one of our more complicated scales just by virtue of the fact that every single note has an accidental, including 2 notes, E and B, that appear to sound as if they're F and C if you're looking at the keyboard. So something to be careful about. Okay, next up, let's do another one. Let's take 45 seconds for this one. Let's do a little bit less time. 45 seconds for this one, the major scale that starts on this pitch in treble clef. 45 seconds. Okay. Well, hopefully at this point, with some repetition and with their homework and with all these lectures, you're getting quicker and quicker at this. If you're still not finishing in the time I'm giving, that's totally fine. Let's just see what you got. So here we go. This is the second scale. This is in fact the pitch D. So this is D flat major. And here we are. D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, B flat, C, D flat. So I believe we talked about enharmonic scales yesterday. These 2 are in fact enharmonic scales because they both begin and end on this black key. This is written using sharps. This is written using flats. So that's just the term enharmonic. Okay, next up, let's try another one. Take a minute for this one. Figure out what this pitch is. Major scale beginning on that pitch. Okay, so that should have been about a minute. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one, unless anybody has any last minute requests for some more time. I'm happy to give extensions for these. I'm moving quick just to keep things moving, but I'm happy to take more time. This is the pitch for B. B is in boy. If this is F, F, E, D, C, B. If we're working down backwards on the keyboard, B. So B major is going to involve sharps. We need a whole step, so F sharp, whole step to D sharp, half step to E, whole step to F sharp, whole step to G sharp, whole step to A sharp, half step back to B again. Beginning and ending on the same pitch with our pattern of whole steps and half steps, not mixing flats and sharps. So let's do another one. Treble clef, this pitch. I'll give you a little bit more time. Take a minute and 15, a minute and 30 for this one. Try another major scale on that pitch. Okay, so this pitch here is a G flat. The little swirl on the treble clef here tells it that this line is G, so we're all good to go. G flat, and since there's a flat in this first pitch, the tonic pitch, we know that we're going to have flats throughout. So here's what this looks like. G flat up to A flat, whole step. A flat up to B flat, whole step. B flat up to C flat, tricky, that's a half step, right? If we go up to C, that's too much. And if we go to B, we double a note. We can't have that. C flat up to D flat, whole step. D flat up to E flat, whole step. E flat up to F, whole step. And then F up to G flat is our final half step. So let's do one more. Bass clef, this pitch down here. Take a minute for this one, and we'll regroup. Okay, so this pitch down here is in fact an F. This is F. So if we count all the way down from our line up here where F is, it's F and F just in different registers. If we've committed any of these lines or spaces to memory besides the F space, for instance, the second to the bottom space is C, you can also get there that way. In any case, this is F sharp. F sharp will require sharps, of course. So here they are. F sharp to G sharp is a whole step. G sharp to A sharp is a whole step. G sharp to, F sharp to G sharp whole step, G sharp to A sharp whole step, A sharp to B half step. And then from there, whole step, whole step, whole step. E sharp is necessary at the top, and then half step. Once again, we have another enharmonic pair. So we have G flat and F sharp, another enharmonic pair of scales. They both start at the same black key, but one's written using flats, one's written using sharps. So any questions on that? Like I said, this may have been too quick for some of you who were following along, and that's okay. You know, all of your primary assessments will be either take home or only one of these if there's a quiz or something like that. So we'll get faster the more that we do this, but how do we feel about the process of writing major scales? Yes, question.
So you can refer to F also as E sharp?
So F and E sharp are the same pitches,
Okay.
but they are different notes. The note is the letter we assign and the accidental that we have. And
Okay.
so we would refer to those as being enharmonic. They're the same pitch,
Right.
with different names. So yes, F and E sharp are the same pitch and they look the same on the keyboard. But if we write F here, then we double the same letter, and we
Okay.
can't do that in a scale. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a little
Okay.
weird, but it does make sense.
It is weird. It is weird. And like, it's a really weird thing, but it really does make the music easier to play and to follow along with. And notice that because we're enharmonic, in this case, one of them has to change. So we have a C flat in case of B here, and we have an F in case of C sharp here, or of E sharp there. So sometimes it's just required. In general, musicians tend to not like keys with lots of accidentals in them anyways, but as long as they're consistent, it's easier. If you have to distinguish between every time you see an F between a sharp and a natural, it can get trickier than if you just know that every E is going to be sharp. So it is not the most intuitive thing, but in practice, it often works out for performers really well this way. Yeah, that's a great question, though.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And we'll continue to look at things like enharmonic pitches and why we use certain accidentals today. So let's talk about what we did yesterday, which is some key signature review. So key signatures transfer the accidentals that we need to make scales to the left near the clef. So basically, we can transfer all the accidentals we get by writing out scales and move them to the left, because then we can imply that those accidentals are still there and they still give us our required whole step and half step pattern. They allow us to use less accidentals, and they also allow us to quickly identify the key of the piece. So we talked about this yesterday, identifying the tonic, or the first pitch, or the first scale degree of a major scale by looking at its key signature. Our key signatures follow prescribed orders, the order of flats or the order of sharps. So every single key signature is going to increase in complexity from B all the way through F flat, and the order of sharps is going to go from F all the way through B sharp. So this is kind of a set in stone thing. What's convenient for us is that the order of flats is simply the order of sharps reversed, and vice versa. They are inversionally related. And if you need a mnemonic, it's fun to come up with your own. But for instance, you know, I can't remember the exact chicken fajita one, but if you check out the lecture yesterday, there's one for memorizing it. Basically, if you memorize one of these orders, you can get both of them just by keeping track and reversing them. You can see that they correspond to our lines and spaces. Accidentals are written in the key signature on the line or space that they belong to. And the same is true for sharps as it is for flats. Yes, thank you, Andelin. Yes, better eat a darn good chicken fajita. Darn or damn. We can say damn, we're in college, everybody. Here we go. So finding the tonic. It is a different process for flat keys than it is for sharp keys. We talked about both of this yesterday. You have to know your order of flats and order of sharps for both. It's essential in both cases. For flat keys, the penultimate flat, the second to the last flat, that accidental is your tonic. So if we're dealing with 4 flats, 1, 2, 3, 4, the third flat is A flat, therefore A flat is 4 flats, for instance. Sharp keys is you go to the last accidental in your key signature. That is scale degree 7. So you go up a half step, and that gives you your tonic pitch. So for instance, you have 3 sharps, 1, 2, 3. Your final sharp is G sharp. G sharp up a half step to the next letter name is A. Therefore, 3 sharps is A major. So this is all review from yesterday. This will require just some memorization and some practice because they are different, but luckily they're not the most complicated processes. It's important that we know them because today we're going to be writing key signatures, and we essentially have to reverse these processes in order to write than we do to identify. So this is what we covered yesterday. Let's talk about key signatures in bass clef for a moment. For the sake of clarity and consistency and ease, we've primarily looked at key signatures just in treble clef. Bass clef, they do look ever so slightly different because where the pitches are in bass clef is different than where they are in treble clef. So the order of sharps and flats are the same, but we have to adjust where the accidentals fall to account for where the pitches differ. So bass clef is going to look like these pitches are lower than they are in treble clef. For instance, the middle line in treble clef is B. The second to the bottom line in bass clef is B. So notice that we've kind of taken the entire pattern and shifted it down to adjust for our pitches. The same is true for our sharp keys. The exact same pattern shifted down. So these specific configurations of how these accidentals are written will become more important once we write key signatures, which we'll get to at the end of class today. So we actually have to keep in mind what this pattern is and where these accidentals fall, because when we write them out, we can't just write 4 flats anywhere. They have to be specifically these 4 flats and specifically that configuration. And we'll talk about that later on today. But just so you're aware, bass clef, the accidentals are generally the same, but we have to adjust for new pitches. So let's do some key identification practice. We started with some major scale practice. Let's do some key identification practice. So starting right off the bat with all 7 sharps. This is in bass clef, of course. What is this key signature? What is this key signature's tonic? First of all, can somebody either raise their hand, unmute themselves, tell me in chat, what is the process for figuring out sharp key tonics? Sharp key tonics.
You would find the final sharp and then go up a half step from there.
Yes, thank you so much, Antoine. Yes, exactly. So what is the final sharp here?
I think B sharp.
Yes, B sharp. What's up a half step from B sharp, adjusting to a new letter name? This is tricky. Yes, indeed. Good job, everybody. Yes, C sharp major. People often will go up a half step from B sharp and say like all kinds of, like with B and E and F and C, the ones where the white keys that don't have a black key in the middle, those often are a point of confusion. So excellent job with C sharp. Okay, what about this one? Flat key, instead of prompting participation over Zoom. Flat keys, the penultimate flat is your tonic. What is the penultimate flat here? E flat, E flat, E flat, E flat. Yes, correct. We have B flat, E flat, A flat. E flat is the second flat, the penultimate flat, E flat major. Excellent job. This is an exception. This is a trick question, alert, danger. There's only one accidental, so we can't go to the penultimate. This is the only one that breaks any of our rules. We have to memorize it. And I see people putting it in chat. Great job. This is F. F major, you don't have to memorize. One flat is F major. It's the only one that doesn't fit with either of our sharp or flat key identification systems. 5 sharps. What do we got? We have F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp. What's up a half step from A sharp? I see we're putting it in chat. This is great. Up a half step from A sharp is, of course, B. Oh no, all these flats. 7 flats. What is this key signature? We have B, E, A, D, G, C, F. The penultimate flat would be this one. What is the tonic for this key? C flat, C flat, C flat. Indeed, C flat major. Excellent. What about this? 1 sharp major. G, 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 G. Yes, indeed, G major. Unlike F, which is a single accidental in the key, G major still works. Up a half step from G, up a half step from F sharp gives us G. So that actually still works. Okay, last but not least, 6 flats major. Instead of rambling on and talking, what is this key signature? Haha, indeed, yes. Good job, thank you. G flat, B, E, A, D, G, C. We can either look at the lines and spaces and figure out the pitches, or we can just know our order of flats and see 6 and know that we have 6. The 5th flat is G flat, the second to last, therefore G flat major. So great. This is all from yesterday. This is all hypothetically review. Once again, I will commend all of you for hanging in there. Summer is so quick. We would normally have a couple days in between, maybe a weekend, maybe a section. Normally there's more time to ruminate on this. So you guys are all doing a great job so far. So really commendable work. So great. And what's convenient for us is that this is a good majority of all of our possible key signatures. There's not that many in the grand scheme of things out there. So we've already covered, this is just about half of all the key signatures that you'll even see, thinking of all the possible permutations of sharps and flats. So including some of the more intricate ones. So nice work. Let's look at keys in repertoire. We're going to kind of dig into this one example right here a bit, because we can talk about basically every single element of this piece at this point. This is the the jazz singer Mel Torme. This is a Nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. This is only the A section, so to speak. This is not the entire piece, but as you may notice, we have this melody here. And if you were particularly astute or had more time to look at it, we have the exact same melody here repeated twice. I've included the lyrics to differentiate the two. Let's go ahead and look at every element of this that we can. We see a key signature, we see a melody, we see a time signature, a clef, rhythm, all kinds of stuff. Let's tie all of our threads together and do a deep dive. So, what key is this in? This one should be relatively simple to start off with. What key is this in? E flat, E flat, E flat, E flat. Indeed, yes, B flat, E flat, A flat, 3 flats. The second to last flat is E flat major. Go ahead, for the sake of use later, think of it as like writing in the margins or scratch paper. Write out its scale. So you can either do this with the accidentals or just go E to E and then put the key signature. Write out this scale for E flat major. Take, I don't know, this may take 30 seconds to write this out. Okay, so here is E flat major. There we are. We talked about earlier in this week assigning scale degrees to a piece of music. Just go ahead and write out your scale degrees for just our scale for right now. So recall what scale degrees are and then write them out. Take, I don't know, 15 seconds, shouldn't take too long. Okay, relatively straightforward in a vacuum because our scale degrees are simply 1 through 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then we repeat back to 1 again. Every E flat will be 1, every G will be 3, every A flat will be 4, and so on. Don't forget that you have your key signature. So the accidentals are implied there. Now, we'll put that aside for a second. We'll come back to that. For the first 2 staves here, so the first 10 measures of the piece, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10 is a measure of rest. So you can ignore that one. For these first 2 staves, count out the rhythms. So a couple leading questions. What does the C mean? What do these 3s with the brackets mean? And I gave you a hint to count this as if it's in 6/4. And think about why I would suggest that you should do that. So go ahead, let's take, I don't know, let's take 2.5, 3 minutes, and then we'll regroup. Go ahead and write out the counting for the first 2 staves of this melody. Take about 15 seconds more, but if you would like more time, feel free to drop in the chat or just private message me if you want some more time. There's no worries about that. Okay, so the material of week 1 is back with the vengeance. Here we are. Let's do some counting. The C, of course, is short for common time. Common time isn't often, it's just a way to describe 4/4. Simple time, 4 quarter notes in every measure. That means that the quarter note is the beat, and that looks like this. So I have the little and here for the pickup. If you didn't get that, no big deal. You can just start right at the downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4 is hidden in the dot, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and this, the hint to count in 6/4, it's implying a compound duple time, right? Because we're shoving 6 quarter notes into a measure. So you can think of this as just 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 1. We didn't talk a ton about triplets and didn't go into a ton of detail. So if you didn't get this, not a huge deal. That's okay. We have 1 with beats 2 and 3 within the dot there. 4 and 1, 2, 3. 4 is in the dot. And 1, 2, 3. 4 and 1 and 2. 3, 4, 1, 2 in the half note. 3, 4 in the half note, and then 1. So relatively straightforward compound time, or pardon me, simple time rhythm. We will listen to this example, and because it's a vocalist and because it's jazz and for a variety of reasons, there will be some liberties with the rhythm, but as notated, there's the counting. So now let's return to our scale degrees. We wrote out our scale degrees. We spent 3 minutes away from them, hopefully enough time to distract us. Now let's look back at our scale degrees here. So for an E flat major scale, now go through, it's the exact same melody again, but instead of counting the rhythms, assign scale degrees to each of the pitches. So as a hint, may right here, on the word may, the G, that's going to be a 3, because we know that scale degree, that G is scale degree 3 in every register, regardless of where it appears. So take another 3 minutes and take a look at the scale degrees for the second half of the piece now. Okay, so scale degrees. I already told you that G is 3. Let's reveal these and talk about it. So we know that E flat, every single E flat is going to be 1 because it's E flat major. Fs are 2. We leap up from 1 up to 5. B flat is 5. 3, 1, lots of 5, 3, 1. And then we go up to 6, which is C. 6, 7, 1. 6, 7, 1. 7, 5, 6, 4, 5. We have this kind of like skipping thing, descending skip, 7, 5, 6, 4, 5, and so on. 5 down to 1 up to 5 again. 4, 3, 4, 5, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, and so on. So I was between giving us this piece and just having us look at a bunch of different pieces, but any piece that's written in a major scale will have a major key signature. There's really not that much fun to have with it. But I wanted to give us this example because basically there's a couple other things we could potentially talk about, like lyrics or form or later on harmony. But as far as what's on the screen, we can basically understand every single element of this, which I think is pretty impressive after only a little over a week and a half. So let's go ahead and listen to this unless there's any questions about the process. Did anybody get anything dramatically different for either the rhythmic counting or the scale degrees? And it's okay if you did. I'd love to talk about why that would be. Okay, well, if you think of anything, let's go ahead and listen to this. It's about a minute long. It starts right at the beginning. Like I said, he takes some liberties with the rhythms. So you don't have to look at the rhythms literally, but feel free to follow along. And then also I gave you the lyrics for this part so that you can kind of follow along that way too. So here we go.
That certain night, the night we met, there was magic abroad in the air. There were angels dining at the Ritz, and a nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. I may be right, I may be wrong, but I'm perfectly willing to swear that when you turned and smiled at me, a nightingale sang in Berkeley Square.
So yeah, like I said, it's the same melody twice, but we looked at it from two different angles. We talked about its key signature, provided its counting, lots and lots of stuff. Basically everything for the first 2 weeks is kind of encapsulated in this little excerpt here. So any questions before we move on to something else? I had a grad instructor who says that when she's waiting for students to give feedback, she sings the Jeopardy theme song in her head twice. And that just seems so brutally long. And she's like, well, yeah, I revel in it. I love when people, it's like, oh my gosh. So I won't do that to all of you, but feel free to let me know if you need anything. So here we go. Let's talk about writing key signatures. So we've been seeing these a lot for the last 2 days, but we haven't actually had to write them. We've just been looking at them and telling what they are. So a question you may encounter, perhaps on a quiz or a homework assignment or the midterm, is what is the key signature for X major? How many flats or sharps is X major? You know, so on. The answer to this would involve writing out the required key signature, knowing how many accidentals, what kind of accidentals, and where to put them on the staff. This is relatively straightforward to do. I'm not saying it's easy, not saying it's hard, but it's relatively straightforward, as all we need to do is reverse the process for identification. So before we get into practicing that, let's talk about how we write these actual key signatures. Let me point out some aspects of where they fall on the staff so we can remember. Writing your accidentals in the wrong place, perhaps the right pitch, but not the right place on the staff, isn't the end of the world. But this is what musicians have decided these should look like. For instance, something common that I see is people will write things like the G sharp here, they'll write it on the line down here. Or they'll take this E flat up here and put it on the line down here. These aren't calamitous issues. These aren't huge issues, but they're not idiomatically what a musician would be used to. We're trained as performers to recognize these particular configurations at a glance. So anything that deviates from this visually is going to give us a second of pause, and then that defeats the purpose. So let's talk about flat keys for a second. Flat keys are written in what you can think of as being the staircase pattern. Starting with B flat on the very center line or the second to the bottom line, depending if you're in treble or bass clef, it's simply down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So I call it the staircase because if you think about drawing these as arrows, see the kind of steps there that descend downwards? It's like going down the stairs. down, up, down, up, down, up, down. There's other ways to think about this. You also alternate line, space, space, line, space, space. There's kind of like this alternation of like one line, two space, but like that gets also complicated. Just thinking of it like you start here, up, down, up, down, up, down, and it gives you this kind of descending staircase pattern. If you turn your head to the side a little bit, it might even look more like that. So that's for flats. Anything else is kind of a deviance of that. If we do B flat down to E flat, up to A flat, up to D flat, you know, up to G flat, this configuration matters. So the staircase. Sharps, of course, have a different situation. They don't go down, up, down, up, down. You can see that. So I think of sharp keys as doing the 2-3-2. Start at F sharp on the top line, or if you're in bass clef, on the second from the top line, not on the bottom, because then you go 2 down, 3 down, 2 down. The most common error is people putting G sharp down here. Again, not a huge issue, but if you go 2, 3, 2, where you start at the top and then descend, that's how sharp keys are configured. F sharp, C sharp, back up to the top, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, back up to the top, E sharp, B sharp. So after many years of doing this, I never not get tongue-tied when I say sharp, 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 sharp. So I beg your pardon if I'm slurring my sharps a little bit. So 2 down, 3 down, 2 down. These are just ways to remember it. You won't be assessed like, what is the pattern called when you do sharp? I'm not going to assess you on these. They're just like, think of them as visual mnemonics to remember how they go. So writing flat key signatures. As we know from many practice for, well, the entire basically 45 minutes today, the process of identifying a flat key is to go to its penultimate flat. If we know our order of flats really well, then reversing this should be pretty straightforward. So for example, if I ask you, write the key signature for A flat major. If A flat is the penultimate flat, we can think of having our order of flats, either think of it or writing it down on the margins, no shame in that. If A flat's the penultimate flat, we need to go 1 flat further, and that gives us our total number of flats. Therefore, A flat major has 4 flats in it. Questions to guide you. I spoiled this a little bit. Questions you should ask yourself, and we'll have the same questions for sharps. How many flats do we need? And which flats do we need? So we always work left to right, not right to left, not a combination in the middle, always left to right. We get this. If A flat is the penultimate flat, we need to think of going 1 flat further in our order. And that gives us 4 flats. We write out all 4 flats with down, up, with our staircase pattern. So any questions on that? We'll do some practice of this, of course, too, but that was a little quick. But yeah, saying it's just the same thing backwards. Again, it's a relatively straightforward thing, and it's simple on paper, but there's lots of points of confusion for doing processes backwards. So let me know. Writing sharp key signatures. The process of identifying the sharp key is to go up a half step from the final sharp. So just like writing our flat keys, knowing our order of sharps can keep this relatively straightforward. Now, there is some danger here, perhaps if you have F sharp major. If you go, well, a half step down from F sharp is F. That's the same letter, though. So that's a situation where you need to think in sharps. A half step down from F sharp is E sharp, for instance. That's a common place that we can stumble with this. Here's an example. Say I'm asking you to write the key signature for A major. Go down a half step from A. If your immediate thoughts are A flat, that's not quite where we're going. So you need to change letter names and go down a half step. Here's your order of sharps. As we know, it's the order of flats, but reversed. And the same questions can be asked. How many sharps do we need? And which are the sharps that we need? If we go down a half step from A, that gives us our last sharp in the order. A half step down from A is, of course, G sharp. That means that we need 3 sharps in this key signature. And of course, because it's the 2, 3, 2, we have F sharp, C sharp go down, and then we go up again to G sharp. We can always test our work on this too. So you can always then identify what you've written. It's kind of like algebra. You can check your work. Not a lot of things in the arts are like that, but for a lot of music theory, that is in fact the case. So that's always handy. Questions? Okay. How do we know if a key needs sharps or flats? Oh, what a wonderful question. Some hints and observations. How do you know if you need the right sharps or flats? This is actually pretty straightforward. I'm not going to say it's intuitive, but once I explain it to you, it's like, oh, of course. If a tonic pitch has accidentals, then that obviously needs that kind of accidental. If you see D flat major, it must have flats in it because there's flats in the name. F sharp major must have sharps in it because there's a sharp in the name. However, if a tonic pitch has a natural name, A, D, E, then the scale less sharps in it. You may be going, well, why would that be? Well, if you think about our tonic pitches and going a half step down from them, a half step down from any of our tonic pitches gives us the sharp on the letter name below it. Of course, we have our exceptions. C, which is nothing, doesn't even really count. And F major is the only one that breaks this rule, of course. It breaks all of our rules. But if it's got a natural name or a sharp name, it's a sharp key. If it's got a flat name, it's a flat key. And then there's F, which stands on its own as an island. So yeah, that's an excellent question. If ever in doubt with writing your key signature, you could either re-identify it, or you could just write out the scale with the given tonic and accidental. So for instance, if you write out a key signature for E flat and you go, I don't know if this gives me the right key, write out E to E, assign all your accidentals, and see if the pattern holds. If the pattern does, you're good to go. If you get a different pattern than whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, something's gone wrong. So you can kind of do some error detection that way. Other questions? Because if not, let's do some practice. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to give you the key, and I want you to write out the key signature. So starting out, I'll give you a minute. D major. Take a minute, figure out what kind of accidentals you need, the process for finding the accidentals you need, how many accidentals you need, and then write it out in the way that fits our visual mnemonic patterns. Take a minute. Okay, let's talk through it. D major, it's not F, and it's a natural name. Therefore, we can assume we'll need sharps. A half step down from D is not D flat, but C sharp. In our order of sharps, C sharp is second. Therefore, we have 2 sharps, F sharp, C sharp. So there we are. Next up, I've been really foreshadowing the doom of this next one. So this one should be pretty easy. Take 30 seconds. What is this key signature going to need? Also think about writing it out on the bass clef. Where should this go? Okay, let's quickly talk about F major and then we'll return to the question in the chat. So F major is the exception. It just has one. You have to memorize that. Yes. Okay, great. Yeah. A great question was asked is like, how does C mean we have two sharps? Yeah, make sure that we keep track of which order we're using. If you accidentally forget to flip your order, you may get way too many sharps. So yeah. What I like to do is, again, like having one, like, eating a darn good chicken fajita, writing out the order of flats, for instance, and then just knowing, you could even label it order of flats. You only have to memorize one of them, and then you could just think of it going backwards for sharps. So, okay, D flat major. Well, we probably know we're going to need flats. The question is, how many flats do we need? So take a minute, D flat major. So if D flat is our penultimate flat, B, E, A, D, we have to go one further in the order, which would be G. That gives us 5 flats. Our pattern is middle line and then the staircase, down, up, and so on. So E major, take a minute, E major. Okay, E major, we see a natural name, therefore we can assume it's probably going to be a sharp key. For sharp keys, we go down a half step. E down a half step is not E flat, but D sharp. In our order of sharps, D is 4th. Therefore, we have 4 sharps. Start on the top line, 2 down. We start to doing 3 down, but we only make it to 2. So 2 down, and so on. F sharp major. I've already foreshadowed the doom of this one. So hint, hint. We know it's going to need sharps. So take a minute. What are the sharps we need for F sharp major? F sharp down a half step is not F, but E sharp. E sharp is our 6th sharp. Therefore, we need 6 sharps. 2 down, 3 down, and then we start with the 2 going down. So F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, E sharp. B flat major, B flat major. Okay, if it's a flat key, we know that we have to go to the penultimate flat, and that the tonic is itself the penultimate flat. Well, B is the first flat in order of flats, so we just have to go one next to that, which is in fact E, E flat. B flat is written down here in bass clef. That's something to keep in mind. And then we have down up to start off our staircase pattern. Last but not least, G major. G major. Take 30 seconds for this one. G major. G major. If it's a natural key signature, it's going to be sharp. Half step down from G is not G flat, but F sharp. F sharp is our first sharp in the order of sharps, therefore 1 sharp. There it is. Any questions? Any huge deviations or anything that came up while we were doing this process? Between writing these and identifying the other previous ones, we've basically looked at every single possible key signature today in some capacity. So that's handy for us. Questions? Okay. Let's do a summary of what we've done this week and then talk about next time. So at this point, we can write any major scale and any major key signature. We can also look at a piece of music and identify its key and the scale degrees of its melody by relating the melody back to the major scale the piece is written in. We can also look at any piece and describe several aspects of its meter and its rhythms. Simple time versus compound time. We can count that, all that kind of stuff. Next week, we're turning to minor scales and minor key signatures and how they relate to major scales that we already know. In some ways, we're going to be kind of doing everything we did this week again, but because we already have a good foundation of our major systems, we don't need to start over. In fact, we're going to get to minor scales by relating them to our major scales. So that should be handy for us. Oh, whoops. We'll then turn towards intervals, which once we have a good basis of what the major and minor scales are, we can relate them to intervals, which describe the distance between any 2 notes. So for instance, between the first note and the 5th note of a major scale, we have a way to describe that. So that is next week. I think I mentioned this yesterday, but I'll say it again. Next week, we'll have the normal slate of assignments. You'll have a listening journal. I'll post Monday's listening journal over the weekend. Listening journal, homework, quiz. In addition to all of that next week, you will also have your midterm. Your midterm will be posted on Gotcha Space and probably go live on Thursday or Friday, and you will have through next Sunday night to complete it. Your quiz will be just over the material for next week. The midterm will be cumulative, will be everything we've looked at so far. So that will be take home. It will be just kind of like the format of the homework, just so you're aware. But that will be going live for next weekend. So just be aware that that's on your radar. After that, we'll then move on to things like chords and fun stuff after the midterm. So, okay, with that, that's all the material I had for today and for this week. So if you have any questions, I'll be sticking around. Let me know. I'm happy to help out. Let's see. Do you mind going back a slide really quick? I sure don't. I sure don't. This slide right here? Yes. Okay, great. Okay, well, I'll leave it on there. If anybody has any questions, just let me know. I'll stick around. And how much time we so yeah, great question, Allison. I haven't made the midterm yet. My goal is to design it to take between an hour and a half. That is my goal. It will probably be I don't know, 5 pages thereabouts. If you compare to basically think of it as like a little more than double a homework assignment is my goal with the midterm. So yeah, it is take home. So you can also work on it in chunks if you'd like to. Yeah, no problem. Great questions. Any other questions? Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and